So I'll kind of introduce Brad as people come on. Heather and Roger are down my bottom left corner, and they're from Seattle, Washington. So they represent Galcom in that area. And then
nice to
Dan,
meet you.
yeah, so. And then Lynn and Kevin are, they're actually in Alberta, and Kevin is not in Alberta. Kevin is in Belize, but his wife Lynn is actually here. Kevin is painting a tower in Belize right now. So he's climbing the tower and putting it in. There was a new tower that was put in. So he's actually gone down to paint it with another man. And Roger and Heather, the people that I just had mentioned, they work extensively with Child Evangelism Fellowship. They have clubs, online clubs and in-person clubs, and many other opportunities for evangelism that they're very actively involved in. And Faye Watford works in the office. She's on the screen as well. And Faye works in the communications at Galcom.
Hi, Faye. I think we've actually spoken before. Nice to see you in person.
I was really excited to join this because I edit the Mission Compass show, so I heard you on there recently and enjoyed what you had to say. So,
great.
So
you grew up in Cape Town area, Fran?
Yes, yeah. My wife's from the Eastern Cape, from the other side of South Africa, but I grew up in Cape Town. And yourself, you were in South Africa?
You know, a little bit all over. We moved around quite a bit. I mean, I was born in Gauteng, but we lived in Cape area as well. So in between as well, the Kalahari, and yeah, we moved around a lot. Yes.
Yeah.
So on the bottom of the screen is Bob and Brenda, or at least on my screen. I don't know how it looks on everybody else's screen. I know everyone's is always different, but Bob and Brenda Gaines, and they're from Barstow, California, and they're calling in from California today. That's why
we can just see Bob's hat. We don't see his face there.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, there you go.
Bob is famous for his beard and a lot of other things. He's done a lot of tower climbing for Galcom all over the place. And representing Galcom too. So then also there's Donna Tompkins. She just came on, Donna and Ken Tompkins, and they're on from the east coast of Canada. They're from Nova Scotia. So well, actually they originally were from the Hamilton area, and then they moved to Nova Scotia and they live down there, the two of them. Ken does all of the audio for all of our players and radios. He is in charge of all of the audio. So he works for Galcom, and yeah, and then they represent Galcom at their church and various places around as well. I could mention that Donna's a great knitter. She does amazing knitting, but you know. I don't know if anybody, I'm not sure who else is coming.
Oh, Don's here, but we'll probably just hear him and not see him.
Yeah, Don is from British Columbia, which is the west coast of Canada. And he's actually in Arizona. He and his wife have a place in Arizona that they go down to in the wintertime. So he's a ham radio guy. He's into radio. He's helped with he's actually managed a couple radio station installations and help with all of that kind of stuff. Amazing abilities to do that. And his church is actually going on a trip to Ecuador, Lord willing, in the fall with Galcom to deliver and distribute radios. So I think we could start with the meeting if we wanted to, and then see who else comes on. I know that Earl and Lenora are probably coming late, they said. And I don't know about Jackie Hughes. She might come a little bit late as well. Anyway, Alistair, would you mind to open in prayer?
Sure. Lord, we count it a privilege to be able to spend this time together, and Lord, to work together in your kingdom, doing your work from different places around the world. We thank you, Lord, that we can partner together, and we pray for your leadership and your guidance over the conversations and what takes place today. In Jesus' name, amen.
And then I just noticed that Lena came on, and Lena is from Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada, Ottawa, Ontario. So she lives quite close to Louise Claros there, even though, because Louise is in the province of Quebec, but they're quite close to each other and where they live. So Louise is originally from Kenya, and she's hoping to be able to.
Oh, Lena's from Kenya.
Lena, did I say it wrong? Oh, Louise, yeah, Louise is from Kenya, no. Lena is, sorry, I said thank you for correcting me, Al. And Lena is from Kenya, and she's hoping, she has a friend in Kenya, and she's hoping that she's going to be able to have some sort of fundraiser to be able to raise money for 1,000 radios and audio Bibles to send to Kenya. So she's we're just at the beginning stage of a project and hoping that we can do that. Anyway, Brad is at the top, and we'll start Brad and say hi. If everyone wants to mute their mic, that would be great, so that we don't get that back noise that comes back. So at the end, we'll have a chance for everyone to ask questions to Brad if you'd like to. And Brad's calling in from Zambia, and if he actually disappears at any point, it's because the internet or the
questions are too hard.
Yeah, the questions are too hard. There you go. Yeah. So I'll just open it up, and you feel free to, I'll ask the questions, and then you answer, and feel free to add any stories or anything that you feel that you'd like to do. So where are you from, Brad?
Well, thank you so much. And I just want to say that I never thought I was suited for radio, but I see on this, if I look at the people here, maybe the beard should have given me an indication that maybe I am suited for radio. And this face, I think maybe I'm very suited for radio. Yeah, I'm Brad. I'm originally from Cape Town. I grew up in Cape Town in South Africa, and my wife is from the Eastern Cape, but so we move around quite a bit in South Africa when we're down. But originally Cape Town, from a place called Bloberg, and grew up there. Yeah, not sure what else to say about Cape Town.
So how did you come to know the Lord? Just a little bit, just about you. You can tell about that, how you got involved in ministry, or wherever you'd like to lead with that. Go with that.
I was privileged to grow up in a good family that I think my family started going to church when I was early primary school, 6 or 7 years old, and had an encounter with God quite early in my life. But as I journeyed, going to high school and these type of things, and I think growing up in an environment where you don't, although my family is not wealthy, they definitely, we had enough, and if you don't need a lot of things in your life, you end up not needing God to be very involved in your life. You do, of course, but as a teenager, just drifted very slowly away and away. And I think later in my high school experience, I had an opportunity to go on a missions trip where I just saw God really, just do some incredible things, just encountered him and encountered the reality of kind of the Christian life and how it's supposed to be. And that really, it was a big changing point in my life. And I think the real commitment came during that high school time where I was encountering God in that context. And I think that made it quite easy for me as I journeyed and, kept looking to the mission field, not as this kind of a dream, the mission field as such, but there was a few things that I encountered on an early trip that really disturbed me as such. I don't know if this is going to interfere with your future questions or I should just keep going. But when I was 13, I went on a trip to Zambia and encountered some communities here in a very rural area where most places were completely unreached. A lot of villages we go into say they've never heard about Jesus. Say, do you know Jesus? Or we've had a few times where they will say, no, I don't think he's come to our village yet. So there was completely non-awareness. And I think as a 13-year-old, there was quite an eye-open to me, just the realization that the kids I was interacting with at that stage had not grown up hearing about David and Goliath or hearing about anything Bible related. And, so much of our perspective and worldview is based on the Bible. And it was really like, how is this possible? How I've got 20 church options, you know, where I grew up, and I've got so much opportunity, and God could have placed me in one of these villages where I never have an opportunity to hear about Jesus. And I so asking those questions, you know, is that fair? Is that right? And but just quickly went, you know, directed that into going, well, it's not a question of fair, right? It's more of a question of, can I accept it myself? Can I accept that to continue to be a reality? And so as I went through school, I think in high school, I wanted to study. I started studying mechanical engineering, and I felt that maybe this is something I can practically use in the field and do something about that. I don't know how, but that's what I felt. And when I got into my second year, I just felt God very clearly say, sorry, like not sorry, but hey, you need to go now. And yeah, luckily I have great parents that are also adventurous and just are very open-handed, and they said, go for it, you know. And a great pastor and leaders in our church that said, hey, if you can find a way, go for it. And 2 weeks later, I was in Zambia, and the 19-year-old just doing, there was kind of, I'll get into it later, I'm sure, a bit more with the project's history, but there was a leader here that came from our church and joined him. So for 2 years, I was in Zambia, really had an incredible experience going around to some of the remote areas and trying different types of ministry, where there was agriculture or, you know, you find so many needs and different things, and church planting and doing whatever I can at that stage. Yeah.
Wow.
Can't remember your original question. Terrible person to be interviewed. Sorry, I just run ahead.
That's okay. I think it's great that you are. I remember when I was at Prairie, and there was this man named Ellie Maxwell was the director, or he spoke one time. He was, I think he was one of the founders or something of Prairie, and he said, the message he spoke was, find God's will for your life, follow it, and finish it, right? And when God spoke to you, then immediately you went, and that's just incredible to see. Like within 2 weeks, there you were in another country and following what the Lord had called you to do, right? So.
Yeah, and I think, like, you know, the added part to that is when I went back to South Africa, at the end of those 2 years, I really felt God very specifically say, time to go back. Very like, this is it. And I was loving it in Zambia. I was loving the purposefulness and what God was doing. But I felt God say that this is, you need to train further, you know, or get further equipped. So I went back to South Africa and did a whole bunch of random things, from working in a lab to doing asset verification. Eventually started my own business, got married. And I think it was only 8 years later where we weren't sure where God was calling us, but then it's a bit of a longer story, but also very clearly heard from God, and got to a point where, you know, you can dream about your ministry or your future or what God wants you to do in your life, but have to get to a point where it wasn't necessarily a dream, but just a non-negotiable. We have to do something. We have to put whatever we're doing aside and go. And that's, I think, where we got to as my wife and I.
Yeah. So tell us about your family then.
Yeah, I've got a great family. My wife, yeah, she's also from South Africa, from the Eastern Cape. She comes from a farm, a complete farm girl, comes from a very more conservative background than myself. And yeah, so we married 12 years ago, and we've got 2 lovely kids, a new little daughter. She's only 5 months old, but is a bundle of joy, and been much easier than my son, which is now pushing boundaries, but he's between 3 and 4. And today he learned to play hide and seek properly, because he said, I'm going to go hide. And after half an hour, my wife and I just couldn't find him. Oh, no. And he was hiding in the washing basket with the washing on top of him, and he wasn't making a sound. He wasn't, normally kids are like, wow, when you come in. He was just dead quiet. We're like, okay, we are in trouble. So I've got a great, that's my whole family. Well, obviously I've got my parents and my siblings and stuff, but they all, my close family, they live in Zambia with me, and love having them here and do adventure. My son is loving life and adventures and wants to camp and go and do things, and so it's really a joy to bring them up A lot of people question, taking them into military areas and many things like that. But I think in reality, there's a lot less dangers and a lot better life for the kids. So we enjoy bringing them up here.
Mhm. Yeah. Our kids grew up as MKs and they definitely don't regret it. They loved some of the things that they learned. And I know that Heather's an MK as well. She has that experience as well. So,
Good.
and also Lynn, her kids were MKs as well. So lots of, people. So I think you kind of said how you got involved in the ministry in Zambia. So we can, if there's anything else you want to add to that part, you can go ahead and add to it.
No, I think there was a changing point for me in terms of the ministry and what ministry as such, because when you go into a field, especially incredibly rural areas, some of Western Zambia is, it takes us, like, I'm based in a place called Mongu, which is in the center of the province, and it's quite rural in itself. But from here, which is the last fuel station, we will sometimes go 12 hours off road from here in the one direction, and then we could do 8, 9, 10 hours in the other direction. And going north, it's very flooded, very floodplains, tributaries of the Zambezi. Most of the time have to go by boat. And a lot of our incredible Zambian team will also go by foot, which my wife and I also used to do. So when we first moved up here, we actually lived in a village for about a year and a half, and parked our vehicle and walked around and did our thing in the village because that's kind of, we see, that's what Zambians are going to experience, and we just felt we needed to do it in the same way. But so the big changing point was when I came back with my wife after that period of time in South Africa. We went back to some of these very rural villages, and I found, obviously, this is 8, 9 years later, and you don't find a lot of impact. We hadn't done that much in those communities, but we've spent a couple trips there. We've grafted and worked hard and planted mango trees and taught on vegetable gardening and did, all those type of good missional things. And but the reality is the village was very much the same. People were still really in a bad place, just food-wise, health-wise, church-wise, everything. And it was quite disappointing, to be honest. And when we kept driving, eventually we came into a community where the first thing I noticed was the dog that, chases your car and runs alongside your car. All of a sudden, the dog's healthy and fat, and going, what? This is strange. And then we go past someone and they're smiling and just the skin is looking good. And these people are happy, and more people go past. It's like, what's going on here? And eventually figure out it's the one village called Fua, which is on the Zambia-Angola border. And actually incredible, terrible story, but incredible testimony is they were, during the Angola war, all the men were taken from the village. Most killed, women, it wasn't great. It was a really bad story, but here's this village thriving. What's the difference? And all we did in that community was plant a very healthy church. We did no other humanitarian aid. And it was such an interesting experience because we were like really we saw the impact of a life-giving church, the church that really impacts its community, brings revelation and transformation and changes worldviews and changes perspectives and brings peace and people start living with purpose, and it just changed everything around them. All of a sudden, we didn't have to teach good farming; they did good farming. And so we realized that really, that the church is the hope. It is the core of what we must do. So everything we do, where we talk about the Zambia project or anything we do as Hope Church, is around church planting. We believe that the church is the foundation and the center of the work we must do, and everything comes alongside that. So we get involved in a lot of different things. The project has grown incredibly, and God has really enabled us to do everything from water wells to medical things to orphan care. But at the center is the church. And yeah, I mean, currently, thank the Lord, we have been able to plant 180 churches that's currently functioning at the moment. But we dream of seeing a church within walking distance of everyone in Western Zambia. And it's a big dream, but we really are pushing and planning, and that's where the radio comes in, and many things come in to strategically hit that by 2040. And yeah, God is, thank the Lord so far, it is, He's enabled it and to grow at the rate we want to, but there's still a huge amount of churches we need. We need 2,500 churches. So 180 is great, but we're very far from where we want to. The reality is of having a church and people be able to experience God in their community is still a long way off.
Yeah, but it's amazing to see what God has already done, and that He's done that directly through the church. And we can sometimes get it wrong and think we have to do the other first, but in reality, that's been obviously something that you've seen firsthand, how God has done, how God has changed a whole community through that. Yeah. So kind of is part of that. You've partly answered this question. What kind of ministry do you do? Because you said about the church planting and your goals and all of those things.
Sure. It could take us the whole Zoom to really run through the different areas, but I'll just fly through some of the stuff that we do, just to give perspective, because I think it's important of how the radio complements so much of it. So we do church planting, but the way we do church planting is after my wife and I lived in the village for those year and a half, we realized very quickly that the Zambians that we had with us, they came from the town and that we were working with were incredible leaders that were called by God and that were doing the work better than us. They weren't having to bridge the cultural divides and doing that kind of stuff. And let's be honest, sharing the gospel and doing a lot of this is actually it's very easy. Well, in its foundation, and these leaders were so competent and had a capacity. So we worked with them and just helped them grow their capacity and work strategically and intentionally and equip them. And very soon we weren't needed in that community anymore. So we started multiple areas and started working with what we call area leaders, which are Zambian that feel called to church planting. And for Zambian to come often from a village to a town and then study and then one day go back to the village is quite a big thing. So for them to be called and to feel they need to go and reach their communities is a massive commitment by them. And so that's the type of ministry we do. And we try to plant the churches that will reproduce. So churches that will go out, and also everyone in the church also carries the burden of evangelizing and planting churches. So we've got some churches that are already fourth, fifth generation churches that have planted churches that have planted churches. And that's how we are wanting to see the growth and fit into a healthy structure and follow up. But and then alongside that, we do water wells, because we have a serious issue of water in Western Zambia. 3 out of 5 children die before the age of 5 in the villages, mostly because of diarrhea, because of water source. So we do put in water wells. We also have medical outreaches in the villages, which is more of a relief, because the medical situation can be quite significantly bad. Also can walk 10 hours and not find medicine for malaria. So we sometimes do that. We also have, and then in Mongu, because we needed a central church that we are developing leaders from, that we were setting an example of what a healthy, life-giving church looks like. So we have a church in Mongu that it's about 1,000 people at the moment, and we have a leadership college there. It's like a type of Bible school. We have the radio station is partly based from there. And then because the church needed to reach its community in Mongu, we have what we call Village of Hope, which is care for orphaned and vulnerable children. So we have 64 kids that live there, and we have a clinic there, a full-time clinic, occupational therapy for special needs children, a malnourishment center for severely malnourished children. And we have a school of 700 there as well. And yeah, we have some other small little business projects that help empower women and some of these side things. And God has just enabled us to have an incredible team, an incredible way. And as we have done our best with what we have, God has just opened the doors to do incredible things like the radio, which never thought would be possible. But as we go, these doors open up. So I think that gives a bit of a picture of the province and what we do within Mongu and around.
Right. Yeah. So it sounds like you've got a pretty big team then. We're doing all this work. I mean, you must all be working pretty hard to get all of those things done.
Yeah, we have. So our missionary team has decreased over the years, which is what we want to do because we want our Zambian leaders and team to grow. And we really have incredible Zambian leaders. So on the senior kind of level, you know, there is Zambians that are, can I just be straight, are on the same leadership level as myself, which I'm in the senior management. Which is fantastic because it gives us so much help and perspective when we deal with tricky things. And these are great leaders. So our missionary team, so our foreign missionaries, they are 5 families, four. Yeah, we're having a big change around at the moment, but about 5 families, some wives and men and 1 or 2 children, and then 3 single ladies at the moment. And then we have short-term teams coming up that definitely assist and go out and do short-term trips. And we have sometimes medium terms that come 3 to 6 months. But our Zambian staff contingent and our leadership is large. It's about 160 staff in total. The school obviously takes up a lot of that. The school and our clinic and our homes, but I would say our ministry, our church planting side, almost probably about 15. We have 5 area leaders, 6 now area leaders, and we're trying to grow that by 2 every year at the moment. We're really pushing to start in new key areas because we kind of see it as, unless we start lighting those fires early, it's going to take a long time before those, you know, develop. So we're really pushing that front as much as we have leaders. So and yeah, so I think, yeah, it's a big ship that God keeps afloat.
That's pretty amazing, actually. So tell us about your radio ministry there, since this is Galcom, and we'd love to hear about what you're doing in radio and how you got involved. And Alistair asked me to ask why the station is in Sananga and not in Mangu. So he knew that was an inside question that he knew, but I don't even know the answer and why I'm asking it.
Sure. So I remember this is back when I came up when I was 19, 2000 and I don't want to tell you how young I am, 2007. And I was out with our project, the kind of the founder, and we were in the bush in a very rural area and just going, how do we do this? Because we were just riding from church to church and just couldn't see enough churches and be in them long enough to really make a significant impact. And of course, it's God that sustains them, and it's God, the people's lives journeying with God. But these people haven't even read a Bible before. They've never. It's just not fair, you know. We get to grow up with all these resources, and we kind of question going, imagine a radio station, and then we never really touched sides of it again. It was a very far off, no clue dream. And I remember again when my wife and I moved up here, I was on a trip, and our current station manager, he came with me, and he had worked in radio before, and he shared his dream of radio station. I'm like, yes, man, this is what we need. So I started knocking on some doors. I think I might have emailed Galcom. I can't remember. I mailed across, and I just, at that stage, it felt like this is the right thing, but I just wasn't getting any ground, and it was the wrong time. And so we put it aside for a year or 2. And when COVID hit, we quickly, with the church in Mongu, went online with the services and went on to radio stations. And somehow, I don't know how the Zoom was set up. Myself and Matt, which is one of my colleagues, we ended up on a Zoom with Jan Eric from Tanzania, I think. You guys might know that, you know. And not about radio. It was just, somebody just suggested, I think it was through a whole nother NGO recommended we chat, and we got talking, and he's like, and you know, we started talking about potential of radio, and then I think he put us in touch with Galcom. And then at the same time, we also do a Bible translation project. We've got 5 languages that are finished their first draft of the New Testament after 12 years and coming to completion. And Wilfred, one of the kind of consultants and that is starting out, connected with someone at Galcom, and put us in touch there, and we both were put in touch, and all of a sudden it was just like every door opened, and we were chatting, and it was funny because I started talking with James Burnett in Cape Town, and I didn't know who James was, and I didn't know he was a fantastic person, an engineer, and then Galcom started recommending people. I'm like, oh, I'm already in touch with these people, and every door just seemed to open. And before we knew it, we had a bit of a plan, and I think out of all the projects we've ever done, it was the quickest kind of funded, committed project we've ever done. And yeah, we put together actually in the radio studio at the moment. One of them, the production studio. It's quite late here. It's about 8 p.m. or so. No one's using the production studio, so I took over for a while. And before we knew it, we were in the production studio. We've never been in a radio station before. I'd never been to, and we were building a studio, and we had amazing advisement from Galcom and from James and from so many others about how we should structure soundproofing and how we should do the electronic, the desks and the mics. And yeah, it was really such a great journey. I've never had a project where I felt so supported, both obviously financially, but also just technically. Obviously, it's a very technical project, and for us, at least, I know for those that climb towers, and this is peanuts, but when you've never really thought about what a studio is and does, and where the sound, how does sound get from the studio to a tower? So anyway, so we at the same time, obviously, we had applied for the licensing of this, and we had a great time with our licensing authority. When I say a great time, it wasn't so fantastic. And eventually got our license and said, okay, in a way, let's get our team rolling. That we got an incredible station manager, which he was one of our leaders, and we were sending him on a church plant, and then he felt very clearly he needs to actually go and lead a station in the capital in Zambia. But we were very disappointed at that time and irritated, to be honest. And then later find out that this is God's intent, because he went from there to another station and had got the experience to run the station. So he's been an incredible blessing, Zambian guy. And yeah, so we put our team together, and then unfortunately, when we actually got the final license and also the frequency and all of that, it was for Sananga, which is 100 kilometers away from where we are in Mongu. And we dream of covering the whole province, because obviously we're planting churches in the whole province, and the most rural is really the place that need the most this coverage. We don't want to lean and go into where we're just another Christian radio station. We want to support churches. We want to support church planting. We want to encourage new Christians and new people on their journey with God, and grow in their leadership and grow in their walk. So yeah, but so now we've got the license for 100 kilometers away. It's also a bit of a town, and so we just had to make some quick adjustments and plans, and so we found obviously we can connect from Mongu to the Sananga Tower, and the licensing authority said, okay, you can do that, but you also need a studio in that town. So off we went and made another studio and rented a little space there. And so we've got a studio, kind of a production, sometimes goes live studio in Sananga, and then one in Mongu. And we're really praying and trusting God. We have applied for the last 2 years for more coverage, but Zambia has been going through a bit of like a change of government, change of things. So they haven't opened up any new areas to any stations, but we're trusting God this year that we can increase by another 2-3 areas. Yeah. So that's kind of how we landed up with the 2 locations and running between them. And when all of a sudden we've got no network, no internet connection, and yeah, it's been the technical side of connecting to that tower has been the biggest headache that we've experienced. But we are getting fiber in the next 2 weeks, which is incredible. I mean, I didn't even know it was in the area. It costs a bit of a fortune, but we have to it's too intermittent. It's that connection we've tried and everything. It's just too intermittent. So we're getting there, we feel.
So what kind of a radius would you have from that station in Sananga? Like, does it come back to Mangu, or no, wouldn't go that far?
Unfortunately not. I was hoping that FM would have a bit more coverage, changing our business plan and approach a bit, but some parts of the province are very flat and the floodplains because of the Zambezi River and the plains around it. So I think in those areas, it depends on quality. The people that do the coverages would better say, but we're looking at about 60 to 80 kilometers max. Sometimes we get surprised. We get people calling in and we're like, how? That's not anywhere close to even our coverage maps. And I think God's hand is sometimes on it, or our engineering is somewhere behind it. Unfortunately, we got everything we did and we applied for and we got the approval for was for 1,000-watt transmitter. But when we actually got the frequency, which is a whole nother government department, they only gave it to us for 500 watts. So we're running slightly underpowered at the moment, but navigating it with them and discussing it with them, and hopefully we can push it up to 1,000 watts soon.
I probably should know this question, and I probably shouldn't ask it without asking you first, but do you have any?
Go for it. Hard questions.
Do you have any of Galcom's radios? Have they been sent or not yet? Or
we don't have them yet. That was such an interesting journey. You know, when we were before all the radio ideas came out, I had used some of the Galcom and the audio Bibles, those units. So it was so interesting when I first came across Galcom and I was Googling it. It just was like, oh wow, those are the things that we use already for our audio Bibles, and I've seen those used like that. And then the next thing I look at, you know, just everything about Galcom and what you do and how you want to disciple and how connect and build towards church and build towards, you know, people's journey and discipleship is just like, these are our people. So I was, you know, obviously we reach out, we do this often, and you reach out to organizations and you don't hear back, but Galcom, we heard back, and it was like, it was such a joyful moment, because it was like, it really felt like this is the right type of partner.
Oh, praise the Lord. That's awesome. It would be great if you could get some radios. It sounds like the kind of people, the people who are in the villages would be the people that would really benefit from the radios. So
yeah. So we've been running for now about a year, and the first year it's been really finding our feet. Our radio team is only 4 full-time people. That includes the station manager, and we're running from 6 a.m. to 10 o'clock at night, and finding the right people to also produce programs that not everything's going out has been difficult. But we've got about 20 volunteers. So the reason I'm saying this, I've lost my train of thought. I won't lie. Why am I saying this? Oh yes. So I feel a lot of the first year is finding our feet. I don't feel that we are necessarily in the most effective ministry period yet, where, you know, a lot of the programs have just been just to make sure we are on air and people are enjoying the station and being on the station. So I haven't pressed Galcom either for those type of radios, and because for about 6 months of the last year, we had serious issues with intermittency with both the internet, and also we had some engineering issues with our transmitter. We connected it day one to go. I mean, we connected it and had to wait 3 months before we got the frequency. And day one of switching on, it didn't work. And we had to send it back to South Africa to get fixed, brought it back, and it blew again within 48 hours. And it was for the engineers and the clever people, it had to do with the feedback. What I've got blank. And anyway, long story short, after taking many of the things down on the tower, we realized it was just
SWR. Yeah.
Yes.
SWR is what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. And we found out it was only
what does SWR mean, Al? Because I don't know what that is.
Yeah, well, it's when you usually broadcast, you want forward power, but it's reflective power that comes back to the transmitter, which makes it overheat and sometimes cuts off because it has protection on it that stops it from blowing up. So there's always a degree of SWR from bad connections and that kind of thing, and just cables in itself. But if it gets over a certain threshold, then it's really hard on the equipment.
Oh,
Standard wave ratio is actually what SWR stands for.
That's what Don's saying in the chat as well. He is your guy for, and yeah, there are some.
So we ended up pulling all the equipment off the tower. We don't even have someone that can climb the tower. So it was, we tried to figure out what this was, and after 3 months of blowing up equipment and doing stuff, we realized it was just the casing, the cabinet, that somehow was causing it, and remove the cable that was going onto the casing and just put it straight into the transmitter, and voila, our transmitter works perfectly. So yeah, it was humbling. So now we're working, now things are well, we're getting good transmission, we're getting incredible amount of calls. If we open the line at any time, it's just caller after caller after caller. And we've got incredible old, we were used to go into the villages and record music in the villages and teach churches to write songs in their own languages. So we're putting that on air and people just loving it. So my point being, we're coming into, I feel like, more of an effective time coming up, and definitely getting radios into people's hands would make a big difference in not just covering a big area, but making sure that there are people in the coverage area that are listening.
Right, for sure. Especially when people live in rural areas, right? They can't, and so it's great for them to be able to hear. What was another question? I asked actually how Galcom's been involved in the station, but I think you've really said that in the how can we pray for you at the end? Like when you're done talking, we'll have a time of prayer. We can pray for you. Are there things we can pray specifically for you?
Sure. I think a big thing is we really do want to increase our coverage. It's incredible that God did give us Sananga, because it actually covers quite a lot of our churches, that it was a more strategic place to put the first tower anyways. Mongu might have covered less. So definitely can see God's hand on that. But we do want to cover Mongu because it is where our church is based from, and keeping volunteers excited and involved from Mongu, but they're not hearing their own station is difficult. And so doing that, and then covering some of there's a catchment area, which in an area called Shangombo, and we've got 90 churches in that area alone, and just to be able to coverage that, put a transmitter there would be incredible. But need a lot of favor in the government at the moment for those licensing. So really pray around that, and obviously the finance around that, and then the internet. Somehow we need to connect to these towers consistently, and trusting God for good connections it seems to be a daily faith journey for us.
Right. Are you able to find things to put on the radio station, like programming and all of those things? How's that gone?
Yeah, we're trying. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff that's on the radio that is good, but not necessarily providing developmental things that we would want. So there's entertainment ones, which is good because we want people to be listening and attract people. So there's everything from sports and those type of things, and news, and but we want to cover more intentional topics. The difficult thing is around the language. So for instance, I was having a show on leadership, especially targeting to our church leaders and in capacity, but I'm not fluent in the local language. I can understand a lot, but I can't speak it, so I have to do it in English. And we just realized after broadcasting a while that every single call we got was in more of the local language, and that is our target, is the villages. So we're lying to ourselves if we say the English is okay. So we're having to translate kind of either on air, which doesn't really work very well, or find the right people to take content and develop it. So finding external content and then playing it in Zambia hasn't been a great option in terms of relieving the pressure of developing content. But we've had incredible, even in terms of non-Christian content, but news coverage, we've had incredible opportunities where God has given us a lot of opportunity and favor where, for instance, one of the biggest traditional ceremonies in Africa is called Kumboka, and it's right on the plains, just a few kilometers from where we are, and where the king moves from the wetland area to the dry area with this boat of like 60, 70 rowers, and it's a BBC, and everyone comes and films it and all of that. And our station manager, because he is Lozi by tribe, and he used to be in one of the stations in Mongu, has for the last almost 10 years been the kind of the journalist that's on the boat in with the king. And so we were able to do live coverage from inside the boat, which really, so even the king and many of the news platforms in Zambia was taking our content, and just happy that, yeah. So it wasn't really answering your question, but it went a bit further.
How many language groups are there in Zambia then?
Zambia, man, I think there's 48 in Zambia. In Western Zambia, there's something like 20 different languages. I would say most probably of those, there are about 8 or 9 key distinct languages. And then there's kind of dialects. They would consider themselves distinct enough, but there's quite a lot of similarity. There's a trade language as such in the province. So it's called Silozi, and that would be, we could broadcast in that and pick up at least most, say 50% of the adults would definitely be able to pick up. So we do want to, long term, we've looked at, can we break away certain towers for certain segments and target those people groups in their coverage of those towers? And obviously we can do that if our internet streams are, we can do that, and we would like to. We definitely don't have the capacity, and that's a lot of effort. But we are moving towards an Old Testament translation, which excites us, because we're going to, instead of doing it where we used to do it rurally and they'll come in 4 times a year, we are going to do it as a full-time project. So just from the same premises where our station is based from, we will have 15 or 20 full-time Bible translators. So that definitely is going to open up a lot of opportunity for us to be able to broadcast in different languages across the province. But we will navigate it as we can.
Go day by day, kind of as it develops, right? So does anyone have any questions that you'd like to ask Brad?
So I have a question. So Brad, obviously it's going to be difficult to keep up with the amount of content you'd have to produce in the language. Do you spend any time, as you're getting the Bible translations, do you spend any time just reading the Bible over the air, or is that not really what's going to work for people?
Well, luckily that trade language we were talking about has the Lozi Bible, the audio Bible already done for it. So we do use some time during that time, we broadcast the Lozi Bible. We also were involved in the mini Bible college, which I think you put on some of your devices. So we assisted in the translation of the New Testament for it. Unfortunately, the person that converted it to the audio, it didn't go very well. I'm just being honest. So when we just found that we couldn't, the quality to broadcast it wasn't really adequate enough. So we've been broadcasting more the English version, and now and then when we have to, we fill in on the mini Bible college, and then we use the Lozi version as well, and then the Old Testament of also the mini Bible college. Those are nice fillers, and we don't have the audio Bible in the other 5 languages that we've been translating. We did do the Jesus form in all of them, but we are hoping, as we navigate the next season, we don't think that all of those languages might move on to written Old Testament. We might find that 1 or 2 of those languages, over spending the time with those languages over the years, we realize that, say, some of them might suit the Old Testament based in a story-based audio version. There's many different kind of contents that are created around Bible translation now that can be a bit more strategic. So depending on how we navigate that, and then also having those, almost a Bible translation full-time center will create more opportunity for looking at doing audio-based Bibles and different things, because we will have the structures and the people and the staff in place to facilitate that. Where in the past, because it was workshop-based and they would come in 4 times a year, it was very hard to build more work than just the translation. So we hope, we'll see. We also worked with Orality. They were part of E3, and they came here and did storytelling with us for the evangelism and discipleship. And we ran a few workshops with that, and that's definitely part of our church planting method. So that has given us also a basis and a knowledge of going, okay, there is this amazing kind of way of telling biblical stories and using it for discipleship, but we haven't really integrated that with the radio yet. But it's just something good to mention in terms of like where, yeah, I think God could use us effectively.
Ways to dream and know that there could be other ways, that things that you can do. It looks like Rogers just said, ask what SWR they ended up with, and if they have, oh, I lost my question, just a second. I lost the question on the chat. Okay. Ask what SWR they ended up with, and if they have an SWR meter. Some of us tech types wonder.
Sure. I'm just trying to look on, I've got a WhatsApp group where I know the guys just send it through. It's the transmitter has a built-in, it tells us what it is. We don't have the separate meter. We did want to get one because when we were doing this, we started doubting. We had another rented transmitter, and that was giving us really funky messages. I mean, readings, and I'm not finding it here right now. It's very low. I know it's below the concerned amount. I want to say it's 10, but I don't know. That could be it's a bit random amount. Is it? I'm trying to look on my phone quick.
So then Lena is asking, do you ever broadcast live church services from local communities?
We have, so what we've been setting up, our technical guys here recently, literally in the last 2 weeks, and they've set up Android phone with as an IceCast source, so that we can be able to connect from anywhere straight to the station if the data is good enough. So we, in Mongo, we do broadcast our service. It hasn't been live. We've been recording it and playing it the next hour later, just because of working out that connection and some technicalities around it. But we're hoping that will allow us in the next, we're testing it in the next week or two to be live from the service here. And then we hope that to start being able to do it in other communities. Although, yeah, we are quite, I know it's a very questionable thing, but we're very selective as what churches we would broadcast content from. It's a great platform, and it can really do a lot of good, and we're just careful that it doesn't do a lot of damage. So we do have recorded in the villages, great, good content, good sermons. I remember being on an outreach, and this guy gave a long testimony about his walk with witchcraft and his dad, and we recorded it right there on a phone and brought it back to the station and broadcasted it, and it was an incredible hit because it was from someone in a community that was well respected, well known, giving the testimony. So we've got someone actually on our team that has been going with our village church planters and going around for other media purposes. He takes photos and gives feedback, and also involved in the ministry. So we've just increased his role and made sure that he carries a handheld recorder at all times and tries to grab as many testimonies and things from them. But we haven't done live things from the village yet. We've got that big Kumboka thing that I was telling you about that is coming up in the next 2 months. So we're also hoping to be using it live from there.
That would be great. It's all learning and growing, isn't it? Someone else, Marty asked, is Brad associated with a specific ministry?
Do you mean ministry as in like denomination? Or what?
Not sure,
would you-
Marty, what were you thinking?
No, I was more wondering what is the name of your ministry? So if ever anybody ever asks, who's Brad Sinclair? Who do we say which ministry are you associated with?
Sure. I'm gonna quickly just pull up the link as well. Let me just get it for you. The Zambia project, that would be especially our kind of international NGO that represents all the work, but on the ground we don't use it too much. As I said, we love the church to be the center of what we do, not an NGO. So when we work internationally, not a lot of people necessarily want to support a direct church, and they don't necessarily have the perspective of what a healthy church could be doing. So the Zambia project encompasses all our work, and we do from the childcare, all of that, the church planting. It's the Zambia project. Here's the link, and then we have Village of Hope as one of our partners for the childcare, but it's essentially another child kind of care NGO that we partnered with, that to give us we didn't want to reinvent the wheels. So although we lead it and run it on the ground, they provide the kind of a covering of it. And then we have something, you can find everything on that link. We have Hope Church is our local church entity on the ground. And then we have a Hope Church in South Africa, which our leaders that started the project here went to South Africa and felt they needed to be a resource church, but also connect others into Zambia and plant churches. And they've our kind of visionary leaders such as started ARC in South Africa, which, if you know, in the US and other places, is associated or related churches. So a lot of different denominations that want to plant churches, and then he leads that in South Africa. And then we very excited, Matt, which I mentioned earlier in the Zoom. He was one of our missionaries here, married an American lady, and they today, literally right now, they're on a flight to America, and they're planting a church in Bentonville, a Hope Church in Bentonville. So we're sending missionaries to America, which is deepest, darkest America.
You can send some to Canada too. Dawn is asking, what frequency is the station?
101.7. Which is sad, we can't get, if we get in Mongo, they would give us new frequencies per area. They don't have a consistent, which seems what it is in Zambia.
If you noticed on the chat, if anyone would like to have the website from the ministry, he actually put it into the chat. So if you'd like to see it, you can look it up there and then go to it.
I'd like to follow up on Bentonville. Is that in the US? And if so, which state?
Good question.
Okay, because
I think it's Arkansas. Is Arkansas?
Yes.
Don't know.
Yes, that's
Walmart.
what I wondered.
Arkansas.
Yeah, that's where Walmart started. Okay, thanks, because we go to
Yes,
that
it's
area.
Walmart. That is, I hear that. I've heard that as well. It's where Walmart offices are based from, or head offices.
So there's another question, and Gunther is asking what the literacy rate is in Zambia.
Yeah, I heard it years ago, but we pretty much ignored it because the literacy rate was based upon whether you can write your name. So currently, I don't know. We probably could find it. The statistics department in Zambia is really doing quite well in terms of the research and studies, but I don't know. It's very low. When my wife and I worked in those villages, we had a few churches where this community of there were smaller communities, villages, so maybe about 60 people. I remember the one only had there was about an 8-year-old that could read, and that's it. So she would stand in front of the church and read the scripture, and then somebody else would create the discussion. So those were incredibly hard communities to really, I would love to say that just reading the scripture would develop a healthy church, but it's practically very difficult to have no literacy in a village. So often they might end up combining with another community that has one or two more literate people. That ends up, those communities work together. Unfortunately, as we know, literacy is not a sign of godliness. So sometimes we have leaders that are literate, and they are not godly. And that's why we stopped selecting leaders, and the community select their leaders once we've taught on healthy leadership. And they will just work if they're not literate. That's, yeah. I know we have one or two programs on the station that we do school, and we've got kind of help, and we're starting. I have no clue how it's going to work. I just rely on our station manager who feels confident about it. We're hoping that he feels confident that there's a program we can make on literacy and to help improve literacy.
Yeah.
But I can't see that.
Two more questions that are here, and maybe after that, unless there's someone that has a burning question, we can pray for Brad too. I don't want to miss out on that opportunity to get to pray for him, but I'll read the other questions. Do you partner with Trans World Radio in Swahili at times?
So yeah, Trans World Radio, if I'm not mistaken, that's where James Burnett, and then also I've gone blank. He's in Fishhook in Cape Town. I've gone completely blank on the name, but he worked with him a lot in terms of helping us technically set up the station. We haven't really worked overly with them in terms of content development and others, but in terms of kind of helping us get our minds around running it. And Sandy Day from also, I think it was also TWR, she helped a bit with our policy making and a few things on it. So definitely, as I said, there's been so many people that have been an absolute blessing. It seems like the radio world is very intertwined. So when we started breaking into different parts of it, we were great to find that this one works with this one. And so yes, but would like to hope to work with them a lot more. Every time I'm in Cape Town, I do spend time with them, and they love the great people.
Kevin and Lynn worked for years with Trans World Radio, so was where the question came from. And then Lena said that as per Google in 2000, literacy rate 15 years and above was 36%. In 2021, it says that it's 58%. So I don't know how.
No ways. Especially not maybe in the cities. Maybe, but not even that. When we at church in the city in Mongo, we've got 1,000 people. If we want to do a membership course or any type of course or whatever it may be, we have to have somebody at the table to help them fill in information. So because maybe that 58% could be correct, especially in a city format. Maybe it's only that, but that's just their name again. It's not like it's not much more than that. So we've got a small little farm that we run as well, which helps in addition support the orphan and vulnerable children. And our kind of farm manager, I mean, he's phenomenal, helps with the fish, and he's technically good. He can't fill in requisition forms for finance. He can't. Literacy is that low, so I think it's much lower than that, at least in the province we are in. Western Zambia used to be Barotse land. It's very interesting history if you ever want to go read about it, but it was a separate kingdom. We have a king here, and all the land is owned by the king. But because of the amalgamation that made it into Zambia, in the first few presidents, Western Zambia was completely neglected. Infrastructure, everything. So it is very, very, very underdeveloped infrastructure-wise. So that's why it leads to some of the statistics being offset wrong, because this part of Zambia is worlds behind.
That makes sense. So let's just stop, and I'll just if you would like to pray, feel free to pray. Maybe 3 or 4 people can pray for some of the things that you heard that you specifically would like to pray for Brad for. And then when it seems like it's quiet, or you finished praying, then and I'll just close in prayer or close the prayer time anyway. So you can open your mic when you pray and then close your mic afterwards, because otherwise we get these echoey sounds.